Mark Cavendish was the star of the presentation, which is kind of ironic because he just, he's retired.
Well, that's my question. Is he?
Yeah.
Or he's not going to be at the 2025 tour? No. I don't know. That actually threw me off quite a bit when I saw him at the presentation. I was thinking, wait a second, tours.
He should not come. I should not do another year, man. Come on, why?
Everybody, welcome back to the Move Plus, our new off-season weekly show. I'm Spencer Martin. I'm here with Johan Bruyneel. We'll go over the 2025 Tour de France route, which was just unveiled this week in Paris. A few other news items, and then we have listener questions for Johan. Johan, right up top, the tour route was released. 21 days, shocker, takes place in France, which actually is I guess more rare than you think it is. It's the first time since like 2020 that it has taken place entirely inside of France.
In the last 5 years, yeah.
Yeah. And you did a show on this with Lance and George earlier this week, so we'll try not to tread on the same topics, but I have a few questions for you about this route. It is very north of France heavy. It's basically spends half the time in the north. They go down to the Massif Central for one stage. I believe that's stage 12. It's also odd because it's 10 days before the first rest day. And then the second week is incredibly short. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days in the second week, basically. But the basic from stage 12 to 19 are almost all just brutal mountain stages. And then you have this actually kind of strange come down stage on 20, and then the traditional Paris finish on stage 21. We're back because the Olympics are not clogging up Paris this year. But what were and I know a lot of people were saying, oh, it's hard. They made it hard, so Tadej Pogaār can't win. I don't think that is going to stop him after having watched the 2024 season. But what were your initial takeaways from this route?
Well, as I said already on the move, it's back to more a traditional start. I wouldn't say, traditionally it was always, a few flat, like if the first week was flat for sprinters. Then, stage 8, 9, 10, you got into the mountains back in the days. It goes back to that a little bit. The difference is, though, that in that first week, there are some really tricky stages. They're not decisive, depending on the wind, because, if there's a lot of wind, there can be a lot of wind in that area. It could be decisive for some people, but yeah, I'm surprised to see it such a long minutes until stage 12. Stage 10 is, a mountain stage, not a high mountain stage, but it's a mountain stage. But the real big mountain starts at stage 12. So a lot can happen until then. And what I think is it's especially the stress and the nerves racing the first week on those roads in northern France, in Bretagne and Normandia. It's always tricky, and there's great opportunities for punchers like Van der Poel, like Van Aert, like normally in Alaphilippe. We'll see if they are in the tour or not, maybe with Tudor, who knows. But I like the course, and I can't see how this is anti-Pogaār. Some people say, there's super long mountain stages and mountains. It's better for Vingegaard. Well, it's good for him, but it's good for Pogaār too. So I personally think it's if looking right now, it's the same three guys we're going to see: Pogaār, Jonas, and Remco. Primoz, we don't know yet if he's going to participate or not, right? Because he kind of said somewhere that he would look at focusing on the races where Tadej didn't race, which is not a bad idea actually. But yeah, Pogaār also has announced his schedule more or less. Saying that he'll do some classics in the beginning of the season. I think he said Milan-San Remo and Tour of Flanders for sure. No Giro, and then Dauphiné as a lead up to the Tour de France, so a traditional preparation for the Tour, which I'm in favor of. So, yeah, it's as usual, Spencer. There's a lot of debate of, okay, this is good for this guy, for this guy. It's the strongest guy who wins, and the guy who has the strongest team. And of course, you cannot have any bad luck. But if everything goes okay, we're going to see these three riders with three strong teams around them fighting it out for the win.
Yeah, I mean, my first thought looking at it, first of all, I thought of you because there's only 2 stages over 200 kilometers. So right there, it's like, oh man, Johan's not going to like this. These weak kids these days. But it is kind of an interesting, because it's traditional, kind of, it's like this traditional Jean-Marie Leblanc start. And then it's like Prudhomme in the second half, where it's like, it's short, explosive mountain stages from basically stage 12 to stage 19, which is fun. I think the craziest stage is stage 13, 11-kilometer time trial, basically just a summit finish, just by yourself. It's the Périgueux finish at the Altiport.
Yeah, it's up the Col de Peyresourde, and then you take the deviation to Périgueux to the airport. It's pure uphill. I think it's 2 kilometers flat and then 9 kilometers uphill. And
that, as what you said, like the strongest rider is going to win. To me, that really makes it the strongest rider is going to win, because even if you remember 2020, Tadej Pogaār got caught out in the crosswinds. I believe that was stage 7, loses significant time. I think his quote after the stage was like, "Yeah, it's not a big deal. I'll make that time up later." And
he didn't really get caught out. He had a mechanical just before it broke.
Okay.
But anyways, he lost time, and then on the Peyresourde, on that same climb where the time trial is, he took back a minute, I think.
Yeah. And I remember at the time, I thought, why are they giving him this time? And you go back and watch it, he might have just been going too hard for those guys to follow. He was flying. But that is like an insurance policy, stage 13, because imagine the Vuelta this year. Ben O'Connor takes that time. Imagine Pogačar is at that race. He just blows up that gap that O'Connor has in that 11-kilometer time trial. I mean, that is a steep, hard climb, steep finish. And if you're by yourself, I have to imagine that you're going to lose more time than if it was a group finish on the same finish. Also, this is the same finish. Remember, Brandon McNulty was pacing
exactly
Pogačar. Yeah, I think that
gives you an idea of how steep it is. So obviously it was after a long mountain stage, but yeah, I mean, we all remember those images where McNulty was pacing, and then I think Jonas attacked, and then Pogačar counterattacked, and he won the stage. And then we all know these images when who was it? The Dutch guy on Quickstep, the sprinter, Bruyneel.
Fabio.
Well, no, Jacobsen.
Yeah, I think it was Jacobsen. Yeah,
Jacobsen fighting to make the time cut. And for the people who have a really long memory, this Altiport is famous for featuring in one of the James Bond movies. There's some scenes being filmed there on that Altiport.
I mean, it's kind of terrifying. I didn't quite realize you could take planes off and land them on a runway that steep. I don't want to do that actually at any point in my life. But they continue on. There's a lot of debate if Ventoux is part of the Alps, not part of the Alps. I think technically, geologically, it is part of the Alps. It appears to be separate.
Really?
That's what I was reading this week. It looks separate when you're there.
It is,
but you have a summit finish on Ventoux. So
yeah,
like that's going to help the strongest rider. Like that's not some gimmicky finish. So if you've gotten time in this first week, unless you're a really good climber, you're sending that time back. And then you have stage 18, 5,500 meters of climbing. What is that in feet? That's like 18,000 feet, something like that. Yeah, 18,150 feet of vertical gain. Finishes, it's a little confusing. Courchevel, Col de la Loze. You see that, you think it's the same Col de la Loze that they finished on in 2020 and 2023 when Vingegaard really, really put a lot of time into Pogačar. Actually, in 2023, they went over the top, finished in the town of Courchevel, I believe, or at least around it. I think you said they're climbing the other side of that. So the side that they descended.
Yeah, I think at first sight, I think they go up Courchevel, and then in Courchevel, they keep going.
Okay.
it's basically a path they made, they paved to connect two valleys. And so it's from the other side, but it's unbelievably hard. It's a super hard stage. Some people say it's the Queen stage. I think the stage to La Plagne, is that stage 19, La Plagne?
Yeah, so the next stage to La Plagne.
I think that's also a really, really hard stage. In my opinion, that's actually the hardest stage. But hey, listen, there's plenty of climbing. I think there's more or less the same amount of elevation, 52,000 meters or something, as this year's Tour de France. I think this year was 53,000, if I'm not mistaken, the Tour de France. I think it's really balanced. I like it. As we said on the Move show, I think the only thing that's missing for me is a team time trial. I'd love to see that again. But other than that, there's something for everyone. There's not a whole lot of opportunities or guaranteed opportunities for sprints. Some of those stages that you think might be a sprint are tricky at the end. Some sprinters may make it. For example, Pedersen has a few chances where other sprinters can't make it. But I think for sprinters, it's not an ideal Tour de France.
Yeah, yeah, that is true. I mean, like Lille, the first stage probably will be a sprint.
Yeah.
The next bang on sprint stage, like stage 3, finishes in Dunkirk. But like these are tricky roads. You get up to the north of the country, a lot of crosswinds, really tricky roads. Like even think of Calais. What was that, 2-3 years ago, where you'd look at it and you'd think that's absolutely a sprint stage. Wout van Aert flies off the front and solos to the win. I mean, that's just like sums up the north of France right there. You could get a lot of funky stage finishes. My big question for you, I actually am quite excited about this because it's almost like a bunch of little one-day classics scattered throughout the first 10, 11 stages. Is Pogačar contesting these stage wins?
Oh, for sure.
And so he could have like a nice little tally of time bonuses built up by the time they even get to the first rest day.
Yeah, there's some stages. I mean, there's some stages for punchers like Van Aert, Van der Poel. And we'll see if Van der Poel goes to the Tour or not. We don't know yet. I mean, he has kind of hinted towards focusing on to try to be world champion mountain bike next year. Not going to be easy. But so that would depend. I mean, he could still do part of the Tour and then kind of pull out after the first rest day or something. That would also be a possibility. If I would be him, I would do that. But there's a few, in the first 7-8 days, there's 2 stages or 3 stages where Pogačar will try to win the stage and get bonuses for sure.
Like stage 7, Mue de Bretagne. Yeah. I think Van der Poel won last time they were there. Was that 2-3 years ago?
Won, and took the yellow jersey in honor of his grandfather who had just passed away, Raymond Poulidor. That stage is still fresh in my mind, and I still consider that as one of the most incredible performances I've seen in the last decade. Because what Van der Poel did there was unbelievable. The first time they went over Mue de Bretagne, he attacked, took the bonification seconds. There was bonification, and then he got reeled back in, and then he attacked again and won the stage. That was the only way he could actually get the jersey from Alaphilippe, who had won the day before.
And yeah, that was incredible. And his first Tour, just right out of the gate. And that's a climb that really suits Pogačar, does not suit Vingegaard or Evenepoel. Stage 5 time trial, 33-kilometer individual time trial. I haven't looked at like the actual map, but the profile looks quite flat.
Yeah.
To me, that could be a lot like, what was that, stage 7? This year. Like it's those guys, Pogačar, Vingegaard, Evenepoel, they're all so fast at the time trial, especially when they're fit.
30 seconds. They're within 30 seconds.
So, I mean, maybe Evenepoel gets a little bit of time there. I mean, we're going back to the problem. Remco Evenepoel's problem. Let's say he gets 15 seconds on Pogačar. Where else is he getting time on him? He can take a little bit of time in a flat time trial, at least this year. And then he loses it in the mountains. So if he wants to win, he's either got to like hope that something happens or dramatically improve his climbing while not losing any time trial ability. So it's a pretty tough task.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And like, so stage 19, you mentioned that to La Plagne, 130 kilometers. That's not very far. You know, that's not long. That's going to be a really hard stage. Even just the more I look at this route, when I first looked at the map a few weeks ago, I was like, oh man, I don't know. It's kind of a weird, it just like felt like we were going back in time. Like we spent half the time in the north, one day in the Massif Central. This does not feel like an exciting tour, but the more you look at this route, it's actually they're quite good at creating these routes that can kind of marry history with modern explosive stages. Just another thing on stage 18, like, oh, being too hard for Pogačar. I looked up stage 15 of the Giro this last year where Pogačar crushed everybody. It's 222 kilometers, so significantly longer. 5,700 meters of climbing. So more climbing than stage 18 of the tour this year or this coming year. So I think he's pretty good at hard stages.
I just wanted to make a little parenthesis, because we're talking about, okay, 4,500, 4,800, 5,000 meters. I did some research, right? And I don't want to sound like the old cranky ex-cyclist who said, well, back in the days, but everything has changed. Stages are shorter. Guys goes a lot faster. The gearing's a lot different. But I went back and did some research. The Tour de France of 1992, stage 12, finish in Sestriere, 254 kilometers. We can see it on the profile here. 7,000 meters of vertical. Claudio Capucci won the stage in 7 hours, 44 minutes. 7,000 meters, and of course it is extreme, but I do remember I did some tours, 6,000 meters was, long stages, but it happened. And then, while I was looking at this, and this is going to be for people who, I found this journal of mine, and I took a picture of it. So this is a picture here of, I think, my second Tour de France. I didn't do the 92 Tour de France, but anyway, the gearing back in those days. If you look here, you see stage, what is it? Stage 16 to Alpe d'Huez, short stage. 39:22 was my gearing in the blue circle. And the stage afterwards to Morzine with Jouplan at the end in the Alps. There was 3 mountains, 255 kilometers. I wrote 39:23, and I made a little comment. 22 would have been better. To show you how things have changed. We obviously went a lot slower. I think the maximum we had available back then in days was 25, but it was like, I don't know if it was a mental thing, but you didn't want to have to take a 25 because that was like bad. If you would have a 25, you were going slow, really slow, which is actually stupid because it would have been a lot better. But in our minds, it was like, okay, 39:23, that's the gearing, and that's what you use. And if you have the power, you can move that and you're going to be okay. So, nowadays, if you would say nowadays 39:23 guys, that's what you get. Mentally, they would not be able to start the race because, you're right. Nowadays, they're riding with 30, 32, sometimes 34 in the back.
This is insane. What you're saying is crazy. A lot of people, there's a lot of noise made about, like, how is Pogačar going so fast in these climbs? He's beating all these records. And I was thinking at the time, like, I'm surprised he's not beating them by more based on what you're saying. Like, it's almost impossible to even ride the climbs with the gearing that you're describing, let alone what your tire pressure was at. I'm sure it was at the maximum.
One thing that people forget, like, imagine to have these gears like 39:23. Okay. So let's say there's a 255 kilometer stage with 4 mountains. Those are the gears you had. So you had to, like, the first climb, the second time, the third climb, you had to go over those climbs with those gears. imagine the muscle tiredness you had already on the last. Now you can use your perfect ideal gears on the last climb, but with the small gears they have, they're able to save their legs, on the climbs before the last climb, which of course is going to have a huge impact on the speed on the last climbs.
And your bike was probably really heavy, and your cranks were like 180 mil.
That was steel bike and 175 cranks. But anyways, the bikes were probably 9 kilos, I would say, back then. Skinny tires, so down tube shifters.
I mean, even we were talking about this just personally off the record, like the handlebar widths recently. My new Ventum, I feel very fast on it. It is objectively very fast. I go back to my old road bike. I almost feel like I can't ride it because my handlebars are so wide, and that has to make a big difference in speed. And that just has happened in the last few years.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember I was always 42 center to center, the handlebars. And then back in the days, there was this belief that, you actually had to try to, like for the mountain stages, some people would get wider handlebars because, the wider you were, your thorax was more open, and the theory was to be able to breathe better, which of course makes no sense at all. But that was the way we were told,
Yeah, yeah. How could that science be wrong? It makes perfect sense. I'm now trying to remember when these tiny teacup gears became popular. Do you remember Stage 15, 2010 Giro d'Italia, finishes atop Monte Zoncolan? Ivan Basso wins. Cadel Evans, very strong at that race, finishes a minute 19 down because he was on probably similar gearing to what you're describing.
I don't think so. I think back then already, I remember everything started to change when the compact system came, like basically 50, 34.
Okay.
So.
And then they have the mid compact too, which is like 52, 36.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you have a 34 in the front and you have a, 28, 30 in the back, it's fine. You can go up everywhere.
Do you remember when Contador started putting the really low end SRAM cassette on because they didn't make the high end cassette that was really big? He was basically putting like a beginner's cassette on his rear, basically for his rear gearing, because he could get like a 34, and it blew everyone's mind. They're like, no way. Like, can a derailleur even handle that? And it could, and it helps a lot. But people almost like laughed at it. They're like, what's wrong? Why would you need that gear? That was the wrong way to think, apparently.
I remember when one little story, Spencer, when now we're talking about gears, very young professional. I think it was my second year professional. And I was on a small team, and we went to the Tour of Switzerland. We were invited to the Tour of Switzerland, and we had no equipment. We had nothing. We were a poor little team. Super honored we could go to the Tour of Switzerland. I had never in my life seen a mountain pass like that before. And so I remember I went to the team director and I asked for a cassette with the 25. And he was a champion, an ex-champion, had been world champion. He had won the Vuelta. He finished third in the Tour de France. So I looked up to this person, right? And so, and his answer was, what are you thinking of using a 25? Do you think this is a mountain bike race? Now, later, I found out that the reason why he didn't want to give me a 25 is that we were so poor that our team only had 2 cassettes with a 25, which he had to give to the sprinters to make it over the climb.
It's funny. Yeah, you take something like that so seriously, and it's like, no, yeah, I just lied because we didn't have enough cassettes. Sorry, Johan. Yeah, so if anyone says stage 18 is the hard, I saw printed after the route reveal, this is the hardest stage in Tour history. Clearly is not true. It's not possible. And also, they might have let you and Lance design this route because 7 mountain stages, I'm counting the time trial because it's a mountain stage, and 7 summit finishes. Mm-hmm. So there's no downhill finishes.
No downhill finishes.
Anywhere to be seen.
Yeah. I like that.
I don't know. I'm okay with it. It definitely favors Pogacar, whoever's stronger, Pogacar or
Also,
Vingegaard.
no, it also, well, it kind of evens out a little bit because let's not forget Jonas lost considerable
That's
time.
true. That's true.
2023 and 2024, sorry. So, obviously we don't know if mentally he still had some consequences of his bad crash in April that could have been a factor in his downhill skills. Probably didn't have the confidence that he usually has because he's usually pretty good in the downhills.
And it's hard to imagine now, but this could be a really close race. If they're both healthy and fit. I know I tallied up without time bonuses, like the difference in their tours. Like if you imagine every tour they've raced against each other since 2021 is one tour, they're within like 4 seconds of each other over 4 years. So there's a good chance this is close, and that could make the difference, as you say, because he lost a decent amount of time on this descent in 2024.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Also, what was I going to say? I totally blanked. But okay, so this is what I'm going to say. At the tour presentation, like no stars. I think it's because there was a Singapore criterium. They're all there.
Well, no, most of them are on holiday. And Mark Cavendish was the star of the presentation, which is kind of ironic because he just, he's retired.
Well, that's my question. Is he?
Yeah.
Or he's not going to be at the 2025 tour? No. Okay. I don't know. That actually threw me off quite a bit when I saw him at the presentation. I was thinking, wait a second, tours.
He should not come. He should not do another year, man. Come on, why? That's it, man. He's, he has the record now. It's nothing to be gained. Nothing to be gained. Unless he just doesn't want to be at home too long. But hey, if I'm Mark Cavendish and I don't like to be at home too long, I would find other ways than riding the Tour de France at this point in his life.
I mean, we know someone who's an expert in never being at home, always on the road. But so, yeah, I guess he could get the yellow jersey stage 1. And then I'm just making the case if I was trying to convince him. Yellow jersey stage 1 if he wins, and then they're going back to Paris. So that's an extra sprint stage. I agree. He should not do this. That would be crazy. But
he's not going to. He's not going to. I think this is just a game of him. I think he said we'll see or something, or let's see, or I think this is a game he's playing with the media. There's no way he's going to come back another year.
And the last thing I'll say about this tour, you look at it on the map, the first thing you're thinking of, if you're a staff member, even for the riders, it's going to be a lot of time in the team bus. It's like I'm reading 3,000 kilometers of transfers, and it doesn't seem like there's not very many stages that are actually that close to each other.
No, I mean, if you look at the map, they're all separate. There's the beginning a little bit in the north, but there's almost no stages that are connected. Basically when you finish in one city and you start in the same city.
Yeah.
Not even close, There's a few really long transfers, but there's also a lot of small. I mean, if you look on the map, it seems small, but it's, it's 120, 100. It's always, it's 2 hours in the bus before the stage, 2 hours in the bus after the stage. It's hard on the guys.
Yeah, I mean, here's just some of the transfers. 200 kilometers from Dunkirk to Amiens. That's stages 3 and 4. 197 kilometers between stages 9 and 10. 170 kilometers from stages 2 and 3. Like those are brutal.
Yeah,
brutal transfers. But I mean, my next question for you is heavy in the north. Like, do they is this like rotating crops? Like, oh, we'll not go to the north for 2 or 3 years. Then there'll be a bunch of towns that want to pay us money to have a start and finish in their town.
Actually, you know what? I don't know, Spencer. I don't know how it works, but obviously it's, their financial decisions. I don't know. I think Lille, the north of France, has obviously put in quite a bit of money to have, because they're around there for like 3-4 days, right?
Yeah, they're basically in what's the region, like Haute France or something?
No.
North?
No, is it not Nord Pas de Calais? No, it's not Nord Pas de Calais. I don't know. I should know because it's close to Belgium.
It might actually be in French French Flanders might be up there. I mean,
Well, there are areas. There are actually areas in that region that they speak a Flemish, like a French Flemish, which is very strange, but it's like French Flanders.
Yeah, I mean, we'll learn more about this when the tour starts. I need to go hunt around up there. I mean, there are 2 stages that start and finish in the same town, which you have to imagine costs a lot of money. You don't see that very often. No. Like we saw it with Troyes this year, but that must be a big check that they're writing.
Mm-hmm. That's good for the city too. It brings a lot of economy to the city. It's super, super busy those days.
It's true. I've already booked my Airbnb for Lille. I'll be there. That's where everyone wants to be in the summer, right? Everyone goes to Lille for vacation.
Yeah, well, I tell you, not very pretty.
So moving on from the tour, well, we'll be obviously talking about this race a lot once 2025 kicks off, but more things going on at Ineos. Their head trainer, personal trainer of Egan Bernal and Carlos Rodriguez leaving. Yeah. He's a Basque person. His name is, can you say his name really quick?
Xavier Arteche.
What's going on here? This seems there's just a purge going on, right?
Yeah, everybody's leaving the ship. That's like, the ship is sinking and everybody's jumping off.
Good luck, Kurt.
Obviously it's a snowball effect, right? I think that a lot of guys, Arteche is there for a while already. Still, when Brailsford was still there, I think he's probably hired by Brailsford. Close contact with Ellingworth. I think the fact that Ellingworth is leaving has an impact on also a lot of staff people. Highly qualified staff people in cycling are in demand, and there's a lot of other teams who are willing to pay decent contracts to these guys. We saw Dan Bingham and his aero assistant. I don't remember the name, but they're leaving to Red Bull. I don't know where Arteches would be going, but probably be Red Bull or Visma or Movistar. Movistar could be, that's he back to his origin. He's a Basque. It's his home team. I think Movistar recently has renewed the sponsorship for another 4 years. So that could be one of the potential. Anyways, I think it's telling to see that these people are leaving. And I don't know who they're going to replace them with. That's the thing. We saw already that in terms of hiring new riders, it's not been fantastic on Ineos. There's been they're losing Narvaez. The guys that are coming, there's Bob Jungels, and who else is there going there? And there's not one other guy that I think Bob Jungels and another guy. But anyway, the other new guys are it's not super big riders.
Yeah, well, I don't. Did I miss this? Axel Laurence.
Axel Laurence. Yeah, that's a good pickup.
Yeah,
that's a good rider, and that's a guy who can win races. Not saying that the other guys are not good riders, but at least this guy can win races, which is what they need. But they're losing. Guys, they're losing Ethan Hayter. These guys win races.
Yeah, like that. That's the problem. Like Narvaez, Hayter, those are probably two of their. Elia Viviani, in theory, a race winner, but hasn't been happening recently. But Ethan Hayter and Narvaez, like those are two of their probably most prolific winners that they have. I guess it's an odd thing too, where the team might be like these people actually might be worth more split up. So it's like if you keep them together, I'm sure Ineos is thinking as we need to cut costs. All right, we're not going to pay these people more because the team's not doing well. And so the head mechanic says, okay, I'm just going to leave and go work somewhere else. I'm probably going to get a pay raise. Head coach, the head trainer says, all right, I'm going to go somewhere else. I'll probably get a pay raise. And Ineos probably isn't willing to give them pay raises because they're trying to cut costs, not actually increase costs.
Yeah. Well, I'm still a bit in the dark. What's happening there. Now it's gone quiet around the whole Pitcock situation. We've seen some rumors that he might be staying now. I still can't see that happening, actually. Um, so we'll see. I mean, what's clear is that right now, Ineos, Team Sky from the early days, it's not the benchmark anymore. And they're not even in the top three, not even in the top four of teams that people want to go to. Anyway, people are leaving, but they have hired a lot of new people, new staff. They have hired new riders. They're maxed out on 30 riders, so it seems to look like they want to keep going, because normally new riders will not sign for 1 year. They will sign for minimum 2 years, right? So 25 and 26 looks like they're going to be a team Ineos.
What happened to Tim Kerrison? You remember when he left, the old head coach?
Yeah, I don't know where he went.
They should bring him back. Get Tim Kerrison back. The good old days. Did you want to say, but do you have Benelux Corner over here, the Belgian Cycling Federation?
Yeah. Speaking of me, I just want to make a little side jump towards Belgian cycling. The same thing seems to be happening there. I don't know what the reason is, but we've already said in another episode that the head coach Sven van Toornhout has decided to stop his collaboration with Belgian cycling. He's looking for something else, probably going to go to a big World Tour team, most likely Red Bull Bora, not confirmed yet. But then, following up on that, I saw that the coach of track cycling in Belgium, Kenny de Ketele, has also decided to quit his position. No explanation given, but it's his decision. The technical director of Belgian cycling, who was the guy who was coordinating all the performance people, is leaving Belgian cycling and actually goes to Soudal Quickstep to be coordinating the whole performance sector of Soudal Quickstep. Maybe at the request of Remco Evenepoel. It seems that they had a good relationship during the last few years. And then the fourth one, the national coach for mountain bike, Philippe Meerhagen, has not been renewed his contract. To me, it looks like it's a financial issue that I'm surprised, because the Belgian Federation has been quite successful in the last decade in terms of medals and world championships, Olympic Games. So I don't know what's going on, but it's kind of everybody's leaving their position there. So I'm going to try to find out exactly what's happening, but I'm surprised to see that.
Yeah, I mean, remember this thing with they stopped doing bonuses? This is a story last week.
Yeah.
I mean, there must be some financial angle, because, as you said, the performance has been the best in the world. Mm-hmm. There has to be just some sort of crunch there. Before we go into questions, Lorena Wiebes, did you want to talk about her third at World Gravel Championships,
yes.
Won track World Championships? Yeah. Pretty impressive.
I think unbelievable. I mean, I think it's people have not really paid attention to it, but Lorena Wiebes, what a star! So she finishes third in the World Championship Gravel, which is a week after the World Championships on the road in Zurich, right? So third in the World Championships Gravel. Straight from there, she goes to the last stage race, international stage race in Holland, in the Netherlands. Wins 3 stages herself, and then helps win Lotte Kopecky the last stage that Kopecky needed to win the GC, and wins. So Kopecky wins, and she wins because Lorena Wiebes just pulls her brakes and she just passes her at the last moment. Finishes that race. 2 days later, big surprise, I see Lorena Wiebes at the start of the World Championships on the track in the scratch race. So safe to say, zero preparation for the track. But she comes from the World Championships road to the World Championships gravel to the road. Starts the scratch race against all the specialists in the world championship. She wins the world championship. She's world champion on the velodrome. A couple of days later, another surprise. She shows up at the start of a high-level cyclocross race in the Netherlands. It's a night race. It's called Woerden, won by I don't remember who won. The rider from Trek. I forgot her name now. The Dutch champion cyclocross. And she finishes 7th in the cyclocross race. So she goes from one discipline to another, to the track, and then back to cyclocross. I mean, I've never seen something like that. In 2 weeks' time, she's been on the highest level in the world in 4 different disciplines.
It's really mind-blowing. I mean, the end of the CMAC Ladies Tour, I don't know if I fully absorbed this at the time. She had to lead Kopecky out in the final sprint, make sure she doesn't win, make sure Kopecky does win, because Kopecky needed that 4-second time bonus over second place to take the overall by 2 seconds. Mm-hmm. That's very hard to do, extremely hard to do. I kind of wonder about Wiebes. Like, we talk so much about Kopecky, so much about Vollering. I'm just looking at the win rankings. This is in 2024. Wiebes wins 22 races. That's a lot. Wow. That's almost like Pogačar, Pataki level. Kopecky 16, Vollering 15. So by wins, she's the most dominant rider in the sport. Obviously, she's helped because she's a sprinter. You can rack up a lot of wins that way. The thing I wonder about, but this shows us why it's not so easy. Like, is she going to totally change women's cycling? Like, eventually, will teams just be like, what is the point of going to the line in any race? Like, should everyone else be racing to make sure that it is not a sprint, that it's a small group finish?
She was beaten in the first 2 stages in the Tour de France.
That is, I was hoping you wouldn't mention that, because then that's exactly the reason why you would say, well, let's take it to the line. Who knows? We could beat her, because it worked for those teams.
Yeah.
But I mean, she's so versatile. Just listening to you say that, it shows you why it's pretty difficult to get in front of her.
And the thing is, Spencer, I watched the scratch race, the World Championships. The way she won that race was unbelievable. Like, she went to the front with, that's a specialty. The track racing is a different discipline. It's completely different. Different bikes, fixed gears, different way of pedaling. She just was unbelievable. She won that like fingers in the nose.
And the races are like a few minutes long, It's quite different from what you're doing all year long. Yeah. Well, let's get into some listener questions. This one's really interesting. It's actually, I've been thinking about this myself, from Kendrick in Chattanooga. How long does it take the ASO to come up with the route for the tour? If the tour concludes at the end of July and they announce if the ends in July and they announce at the end of October, does that mean they plan the tour in just 3 months? I would think they would have to be working at least a year in advance, because they have to coordinate with all the different towns and government. Or does the tour have so much money does the tour bring in so much money they can do whatever they want? I'd assume, that it takes a year at least to plan.
It's already decided where it's going to start next year and even the year after. 26 and 27.
Yeah.
To start. And then they do work a year ahead for sure. And it's a balance act between, the bidding and what they want and the terrain. But no, obviously not. It's not like the tour finishes and then in the next 3 months they decide what the course is going to be. It's a year in advance for, I would say, the fine tuning of the stages, but way before that already that is decided.
I assume they have it's probably someone in a car, right? Driving around right now, looking at potential routes. I mean, it is, when you start thinking about how granular you have to get, it's actually quite interesting. Or finding, thing I'm always fascinated about is finding climbs, like the Giro and the Vuelta are really good at this. They must hear rumors this climb is really hard. All right, we got to go check it out and see if this is going to be good for the race. And they have to literally go out and drive it.
Yeah. Well, the Tour de France is not the same. There's not a lot of experiments in the Tour. Usually they go to the places where they've been before. There's exceptions, but the Vuelta is different. The Vuelta is like, okay, let's see. Oh, there's a climb there. Oh, I just heard they paved the cattle path. Where the goats used to go up.
Yeah, no, they find ridiculous. The most ridiculous climbs.
That doesn't happen in the Tour de France ever.
The Tour also has the benefit of there's so many races in France that they can even just copy and paste parts of. Like, I feel like almost every road they do, there's a regional race that probably uses that road. So they could they don't have to do as much like home brewing as maybe the Vuelta does. I'd assume, there's a lot of talk of like, oh, this is a Pogačar stopping route. And it was the same thing with Lance. It was always like, they're trying to make it so Lance can't win. But they probably have the route locked in by the time the Tour finishes, right?
Yeah.
Like there's not a lot of wiggle room there.
Oh, no.
So question number 2, can you comment on how much bike choice affected the Tour? Pogačar seemed to ride a more aero bike with deeper section wheels on the mountain stages compared to Vingegaard, who seemed to ride a climbing bike with lighter, less aero wheels, since Pogačar seemed to gain some of his time on the less steep sections of the climbs where aero should make more of a difference. Would Vingegaard benefit from using a more aero bike? This is something I was wondering about too, because not just Pogačar, every rider on UAE rides the same bike and wheels every day of the year. They never switch wheels, which goes like Visma definitely switches wheels based on stages. But I've been curious to ask you this as well, Johan.
Well, first of all, I don't think there's that much difference between bikes at the highest level. It's obviously it's often a choice, people like the way this bike handles better. In UAE, actually, I think they only use one model bike, a road bike. Visma has the choice between the aero bike and the climbing bike. I didn't realize that they're always using the same section wheels. What like, is it like height, like 60 or 50 or?
They're pretty deep. I don't think they're 60, maybe 50.
Yeah.
But yeah, just next time you see a race, just like every UAE rider seems to be on exactly the same bike and wheels. No, like actually, I'm surprised the bike industry doesn't give them more crap about that, because there's all these like, oh, you got to have 5 bikes with different sets of wheels. It's like, well, Pogačar races the same bike and the same wheels every day of the year, no matter what race he's in.
I think the Pogačar of 2024 didn't really matter which bike he was racing.
Yeah. I would also say I think
I don't think it will come down at that level of sophistication in the equipment. I don't think there's a huge I don't think there's any reason why a guy has lost or won a race because of the equipment. Let's put it that way. Maybe time trials is different.
Yes.
There's a big difference between different brands and time trial bikes.
I would say, though, if go back and watch the Pyrenees stages from this year, Pogačar definitely got an aero advantage just on drafting. Like, he was in the wheels a lot because, Vingegaard probably thought, I have to do something here if I want to win the Tour. And he was letting Tadej sit on his wheel a ton, which does give you a huge aero advantage.
Of course.
Yeah. George thinks that what was that? It was the Morzine stage at the 2023 Tour. George Hincapie thinks that the deeper section wheels mess Pogačar up on that descent, but I don't know if that's true or not.
Which one was that?
Remember when Carlos Rodriguez won?
Yeah. Juplan.
Which, when you do run deep wheels like that in the mountains.
That's actually the same climb I mentioned. Stage 255 kilometers in the 91 Tour de France. I don't think so. I think what I saw didn't mess him up, because first of all, he could stay perfectly with Jonas, but Pogačar was definitely not the same rider, and he was not great in any descent. Actually, I had the impression that Jonas was a bit better in the descent than Tadej in the 2023 Tour de France. When you're in that zone of everything works or nothing seems to work, it has an impact on the climbing, but also on the descents.
Yeah, and also So I do agree with you. I thought Pogačar was the weaker descender in 2023. Vingegaard weaker descender in 2024. What did they both have in common? They both had bad crashes that spring, and I don't know if that's probably mental and also physical. Like you just don't have the same comfort on the bike, perhaps, as the other rider. So yeah, if you want to descend fast, don't have a bad crash like 2 months before the tour that you have to come back from. Next question. This is David in Hoboken, New Jersey. I'm a recreational cyclist. When I ride in a group or solo, I'm lit up like a Christmas tree to ensure I'm visible to car traffic. Mainly a rear red taillight and front white light. In all the videos I see of pros training, either as a team, solo, or just a few other riders, they never have lights on their bikes, even when riding in heavy traffic. Why is this? I have a theory.
I mean, most of the riders, first of all, don't compare professional cyclists with recreational riders, because most professional cyclists, whether they go train in groups of small groups they usually have a following car behind them, or in the worst case, a motorbike that is with them with assistance, with spare wheels or, drinks, food, whatever. I do see, however, a lot of riders with backlights, front lights, probably not so much. And also it depends in the area where you're training. Of course, it's riding bikes in the US is not the same as riding bikes in Europe, for the simple reason that in the US, car drivers are not as used to cyclists on the road, and they are, they can't estimate the distance or the speed a cyclist gets close to your car. In Europe, it's different. Europe is, and then depends in which parts of Europe, but if you see Belgium, Holland, Italy, France, Spain, I would say drivers are used to cyclists. I'm not saying that they are always respecting them, but it's different. It's different. But I see most of the riders over here have at least a flashing backlight when they're riding in traffic.
Yeah, I would recommend that. And I think what's happening here is David is maybe seeing like photo shoots. Like if you're seeing videos of them, it's probably that's preset, and they're gonna take all the stuff off their bike that doesn't look good. But you'd be surprised when you see pros training, like they have all the ugly stuff on their bikes that we have, like frame bags and things like that, just because they're useful. And then, as you say, Johan, I think that there's a difference in the US and Europe. But I mean, I bought a backlight that I saw Wout van Aert using, the Garmin Varia, because it's like, oh, if Wout's using it, it's got to be good. And it is a great rear backlight to have. So if you see
with the radar that kind of alerts you when it comes.
Super helpful. And as you say, a lot of these guys have follow cars. So at least when they're doing serious training. So you really don't want to, even if you see them on certain roads, like I've gone to some areas that like Remco Evenepoel uses a training camp, and I've thought like, ooh, these main roads are pretty busy. I don't know if I would ride on here. You got to remember he probably has a follow car. So don't always do what they do. It's make sure you're taking care of your own safety. Look lamer than them, because they're probably also having lights on the back of their bikes when they're training by themselves. Last question. This is for Johan. Besides the obvious improvements, and this is from Brad from Cape Town. I wish I was in Cape Town. I'm jealous. Besides the obvious improvements in nutrition, training, and equipment, what's the biggest change you've seen in the modern era of cycling? Specifically, have you seen an evolution in team tactics, or is cycling fundamentally the same sport that it has always been?
Actually, I haven't seen an improvement in team tactics. Quite on the contrary, I think tactics become secondary in modern cycling, and cycling is a lot more based now on performance and knowing exactly what they can do for such an amount of time. Back in the days, we didn't have that information. We didn't know exactly, okay, this rider can do this for such an amount of time. We didn't have the tools to measure it. So I think tactics have become secondary. They're still necessary, and sometimes mistakes are being made tactically that they could prevent certain outcomes that they don't want. But I think it's it's first of all the bikes. The bikes have improved tremendously. I saw somewhere somebody who did all the calculations and put everything into all the stats, and he came to the conclusion that nowadays bikes compared to the bikes of late 90s, early 2000s are 16% faster. 16%. That's huge. 16%. Nutrition. We've talked about it. It's day and night. It's become one of the most important aspects of performance. And it's huge. I mean, if you look at, for example, the Ironman last weekend, nutrition is the most focused aspect of that sport right now. Training, of course, has changed. Back in the days, training was based on experience from other riders, not so much science behind. That has changed a lot. And then the psychological aspect, the mental. I mean, nowadays, every team, every cyclist has a mental coach. If you would have said this 20 years ago, you would have been considered, weak or soft. Do you need a mental coach? You're not a tough guy, right? The mental aspect of high performance and elite sport is super important. It's one of the most important aspects, and I think that has changed a lot too. So other than that, I think that's about it.
I agree with you. I do think team tactics have gotten worse. Like, think of Ayuso on the Galibier. Like, that's not happening in a Johan Bruyneel team where you have someone hiding in the back.
I know, but you know what? I mean, it didn't have, okay, you can say, well, it's bullshit what he does, but it ultimately didn't have any effect on the outcome of Pogačar and UAE, whether what he did there or not do it. I mean, it didn't look good, and I didn't like it, but it wouldn't have made any difference.
Well, in retrospect, he could have stolen his teammate's bike, could have stolen Pogačar's bike. It probably still would have been fine. Like, he none of that actually made any difference in retrospect. I guess one thing I've maybe started to notice is the point, there's so much pressure on points now. I do feel like that changes the calculus a lot of times. Like, people will slot into racing for second, third. Like, think of even Lombardia. Cofidis, I think it was one. Izagirre was second or third, and it gets like 400 UCI points for that performance, which that's a lot. Like, if you scored 1,000 in a year, you would be one of the highest earning points riders on a team. So he's getting half of that in one race, and that's really valuable for the team to stay in the World Tour. I do think that's probably changed the way people race more than we think.
Yeah. You see a lot of riders now fighting for 10th place, 15th place. Every single point counts. That has changed for sure.
Or do you see the double sprinter now, maybe more than you used to, where you have
also, yeah.
Well, do you have anything else, Johan, before we take off?
I think we've covered a lot for sure. There's a few things that we left out, but we'll carry it over.
We'll be back.
Yeah. We'll be back next week.
And if you want your questions answered, send them to info@wedo.team, and we will get those on the next show if we have room. Well, thanks so much, Johan, and we will talk soon.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Bye.